The last born. The sun had barely risen over Benin City when Isiosa's mother began her usual morning routine, opening the windows, sweeping the sitting room, and muttering one quiet prayer after another for her last child. Her mother always said that being the last born meant Isiosa had the most privilege, yet somehow the least discipline. At 19, Isiosa was the child everyone had high hopes for, yet the one who listened the least. Growing up in a house full of older siblings had shaped her. Her brothers and sisters were already adults by the time she turned 13, each one leaving home one after the other to chase education, marriage, or work. Her closest sibling, Osesu, was 7 years older. They hardly shared anything. Not clothes, not secrets, not even a proper sister-to-sister friendship. Osesu had been too busy in university during the years Isiosa was entering her teenage stage, and by the time Isiosa matured, Osesu had already gotten married. So Isiosa grew up halfway alone. Her parents, both teachers at different schools, were loving but strict. They believed in structure, responsibility, and the importance of a woman building a good reputation. But Isiosa believed in living life the way she wanted. She wasn't rude, just stubborn, in that quiet, firm way that made her pretend to listen while planning to do the opposite. Stay away from men. Her father would say each time she dressed up too nicely for a casual outing. Yes, sir, she would reply, even though she had already made plans to meet someone. Focus on your future. Look at your sister. She married a good man, her mother would add. Yes, ma, she would answer, scrolling through her phone, replying to messages from the same men she was told to avoid. Her parents thought she was naive, but Isiosa wasn't naive. She simply felt misunderstood. She was young, beautiful, and full of life. Her almond-shaped eyes, smooth brown skin, and slim figure drew attention everywhere she went. She liked the attention. It made her feel powerful, something she never truly felt growing up under the shadows of her older siblings. Everyone had expectations for her, but she wanted to choose her path by herself. That was how she met the two men who would later shape the direction of her life. But in the beginning, she didn't see it as danger. She saw it as freedom. She was the last born, yes, but also the first in the family to live in a world overflowing with social media, independence, freedom, and temptation. Her parents didn't understand what it felt like to be 19 in the age of instant messaging and fast relationships. And because she was the only child left at home, her parents monitored her closely, calling her phone whenever she was late, asking who she was with, questioning her outfits. She hated it. She wanted to breathe. Sometimes, late at night, she would lie on her bed and imagine what her life would look like if she lived alone, far away from all the rules, warnings, and lectures. In her mind, adulthood meant one thing: doing whatever she wanted without explaining herself. So when different men began showing interest in her, she didn't feel guilty. She felt grown. She liked the feeling of being wanted, of being admired, of being cared for. And soon, that desire for attention, and her inability to choose just one person, placed her on a path her parents had tried to prevent all along. But Isiosa didn't know that yet. All she knew was that she was 19, beautiful, and free. And the world before her felt wide enough to make her believe every mistake she was about to make would have no consequence. She didn't know that choices, once made, have a way of reshaping destinies. And hers was about to change forever. Two men, two worlds. Isiosa met Tade first. It was on a humid Saturday evening at a friend's birthday party. She hadn't even planned to attend. Her mother wanted her to stay home and help with cooking, but her friend had begged her until she finally agreed. As soon as she stepped into the small but brightly decorated compound, her beauty drew attention like a magnet. Tade noticed her almost immediately. He wasn't loud or showy like some of the other young men at the party. He simply watched her from across the yard, smiling quietly while sipping a drink. There was something mature about his confidence. He didn't rush to her. He waited until she was alone getting a bottle of soft drink before approaching with a polite greeting. "Hi, I'm Tade. I haven't seen you around here before." That was how it began. Simple, calm, respectful. Tade was 27, running a small but growing business. He wasn't flashy, but he had money and stability. He dressed well, spoke well, and carried himself with an easy assurance that made people trust him. He had the kind of life Isiosa's parents wanted for her: clean, steady, secure. He treated her with softness she wasn't used to. He called to check on her, sent her money whenever she needed anything, and always asked for her consent before making plans. He never pressured her, never raised his voice, never challenged her decisions. And somehow, that gentle stability bored her sometimes. Because a few months after meeting Tade, she crossed paths with Emeka, the complete opposite. She met him at a roadside food joint near her school. She had gone there to buy spaghetti and fried fish after a long day, and he happened to be seated at the same table due to lack of space. He cracked a joke about the food being too peppery, and she laughed harder than she expected. Where Tade was calm, Emeka was fire. Where Tade was gentle, Emeka was bold. Where Tade offered comfort, Emeka offered excitement. Isiosa was torn between two men, two worlds, and two completely different versions of herself. On one side was Tade. He was the kind of man her parents would have picked for her. Stable, caring, and responsible. Tade had a good job, a nice car, and plans for the future that always included her. He treated her like a queen, sending her money for her hair, for data, for whatever she needed, always making sure she was comfortable. With Tade, she felt safe. He was the promise of a secure future, a life free from worry. Then there was Emeka. Emeka lived in a small, crowded room and hustled every single day just to get by. He had no car, no savings, and definitely no expensive clothes. But what he lacked in material wealth, he made up for in charisma. He was funny, charming, and had a way of making her feel truly alive. When she was with Emeka, she wasn't a child being pampered. She was a woman, desired, adored, and completely understood. The passion she felt with him was a fire she couldn't ignore. Logically, it made no sense. She was dating two men at the same time, and she knew it was wrong. Deep down, a small voice whispered that this couldn't last forever. But emotions rarely follow logic, do they? She would spend her weekdays talking to both of them, living in a constant state of emotional whiplash. The strangest part? Whenever Tade sent her money, a strange impulse would take over. She'd find herself at the market, buying rice, tomatoes, and meat, and then heading straight to Emeka's place to cook for him. She was using the resources from her safe world to feed the passion in her secret one. Her best friend, Ivy, saw the disaster waiting to happen. Essay, "This is dangerous," she warned one afternoon. "You can't keep two men like this. One day, it's all going to blow up in your face." But Isiosa just shrugged it off, convinced she had everything under control. "Nothing will happen," she'd say. "I know what I'm doing." But did she really? Every time she tried to think clearly, she'd justify her actions. She was young, she was just exploring, and besides, neither of them had caught her yet. This delicate balancing act became her new normal. She was living two separate lives, one polished and presentable in the daylight, and the other reckless and thrilling in the shadows. And she became frighteningly good at it. Her mornings were a perfect summary of her dilemma. She'd wake up to two good morning messages. The first, from Tade, would be long and caring, asking about her dreams and reminding her to eat breakfast. It made her feel cherished. The second, from Emeka, would be short and playful. "Wake up, Jer. I day hungry." It made her feel a jolt of excitement. Together, these two messages made her feel completely and utterly wanted. But desire is a dangerous guide. It can blind you to the consequences that are creeping closer and closer. Isiosa didn't feel guilty. She felt powerful, in control. On the days Tade sent her money, she'd thank him sweetly, her voice full of gratitude. Then, she'd take a portion of that money and disappear into the world she kept hidden. She'd change into simple shorts and a t-shirt and walk confidently down the dusty path leading to Emeka's one-room apartment. She didn't try to hide. It was as if this part of her life was so separate, it couldn't possibly collide with the other. When she knocked on his door, Emeka's familiar voice would shout from inside, "Hold on, I day come," and he'd open it with that crooked smile she had grown to adore. His room was sparse, just a bed, a noisy fan, and a small speaker. But to Isiosa, it was a sanctuary. It was the one place she could be herself, without any expectations. She wasn't the last-born everyone watched over. She was just a girl, cooking for a man she was drawn to, listening to him talk about his day carrying cement bags at a construction site. And he always made her laugh. Ivy tried again to get through to her. "Essay," she said, her voice serious. "You're playing with fire. Tade is serious about you. He talks about marriage. And Emeka, you know he has nothing to offer you right now. You have to choose. Isiosa just tore a leaf into tiny pieces, unable to give a straight answer. I don't know, she muttered. I love them differently. Ivy sighed. But love is not two places at once, essay. Meanwhile, of the two men, it was Tade who was falling the hardest. The more time he spent with her, the more convinced he became that she was the one. He started talking about their future together, about marriage, about moving to a better apartment. He was building a future for them, completely unaware that her heart was divided. Every time Isiosa considered ending things with Emeka, her heart physically resisted. He felt so real, so genuine. His simple, ordinary life was a breath of fresh air. She was caught between two worlds. One represented the stable future her parents had always dreamed of for her. The other represented the wild, untamed freedom her own heart craved. She didn't know it yet, but her inability to make a choice was planting the seeds of the biggest storm she would ever face. The story was no longer about which man she would choose. It was about the inevitable consequences of wanting them both. Isiosa didn't say a word, because if she were honest with herself, truly honest, she'd admit she wasn't choosing. She was just postponing. In her mind, she had it all under control. As long as she managed her time perfectly, as long as she stayed careful, nothing bad could ever happen. Her worlds were separate, and she was the only one who could travel between them. But the lies were starting to pile up, getting heavier each day. Tade started asking more questions. His voice, once full of trust, now held a slight edge of suspicion. Why didn't you pick up earlier? He'd ask. How come you're always busy in the evenings? Who were you talking to when I called just now? And for every question, Isiosa had a ready answer, a new excuse she pulled out of thin air. Her lies became so smooth, so convincing, that sometimes she almost believed them herself. Oh, sorry, I was sweeping. I didn't hear the phone. My phone was charging in the other room. My mother sent me on an errand to buy something. I was in class, you know how it is. And Tade believed her. Or at least, he wanted to. Love has a funny way of making a person believe things, even when a small voice in their head is screaming that something is wrong. Meanwhile, her connection with Emeka was growing deeper. He wasn't the kind of man to shower you with flowery words or grand gestures. His feelings were quiet, but they ran deep. Every time she visited him, his eyes would light up in a way that spoke volumes. It was a silent welcome, a quiet celebration of her presence. Sometimes, he'd hold her hand just a little longer than necessary, his thumb tracing small circles on her skin. Other times, he'd ask about her day, not just as a pleasantry, but with a genuine interest that made her feel seen. Late at night when the world was quiet, he would sometimes turn to her and say softly in that mix of pidgin and English she loved, I know no wedding you see for me, but I am happy say you day my life. Those words were like a warm blanket on a cold night. They wrapped around her heart, making her feel chosen, making her feel needed. And that's how the addiction started. She became addicted to the feeling of being important to two different men for two completely different reasons. With Tade, she was the sophisticated, university-educated girlfriend. With Emeka, she was the down-to-earth girl he felt lucky to have. She was living two lives, and she was the star of both. Back at home, the changes in her weren't going unnoticed. A new glow seemed to radiate from her, an extra spring in her step. Her mother, with her keen maternal instinct, picked up on it immediately. Essay, are you seeing somebody? She asked one evening, her eyes searching Isiosa's face for the truth. For a split second, Isiosa froze. The question hit too close to home, but she recovered quickly, putting on her most innocent smile. No, Mummy. I'm just happy, she lied, the word feeling strange on her tongue. Her father, a man of few words who rarely got involved in such matters, simply watched her from his chair. He didn't say anything to her directly, but later that night, she overheard him talking to her mother. His voice was low and heavy. She thinks she is wise, he said. But life has a way of teaching those who refuse to listen. Isiosa didn't hear that conversation, and even if she had, she probably wouldn't have listened. She was floating on a cloud of her own making, convinced that she was untouchable. Consequences? Fate? Guilt? Those were for other people, for careless people. As long as she remained careful, her two worlds would never, ever collide. But secrets are not seeds. You cannot bury them in the ground and expect them to remain silent forever. No, secrets are more like stubborn weeds. They grow in the dark. They spread their roots, tangling everything together beneath the surface. And they wait patiently, silently, for the right season to break through the soil and expose everything. Isiosa didn't know it yet, but the quiet storm she had created with her own hands was slowly gathering strength on the horizon. And when it finally broke, nothing in her life would ever be the same again. Then December arrived, bringing with it the familiar magic of the festive season. The air turned crisp with the Harmattan breeze, and dry, golden leaves rustled along the streets. You could hear the distant sound of children rehearsing their Christmas carols, their cheerful voices carrying on the wind. Neighbors who had been away in the big cities all year started returning, their cars packed to the roof with luggage and gifts. Isiosa had been looking forward to the holidays, but for entirely different reasons than her parents. For them, Christmas was all about family, tradition, and faith. For her, Christmas was a major inconvenience. Her parents had been talking about the trip to their village for weeks. It was an annual ritual. Every single December, they traveled back to their hometown in Edo State for massive family reunions and end-of-year prayer meetings. For as long as Isiosa could remember, she had been dragged along on these trips. Now that her older siblings were grown and married with their own families, she was the last one left to be forced into the annual pilgrimage. She complained, of course. She tried every excuse she could think of. "Mummy, why must I go this year? I have things to do here in the city." Her mother's face hardened into a frown. "Which things?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "Tade." Isiosa quickly looked away, avoiding her mother's gaze. "No, it's not about him. I don't want to go." But the argument was cut short by her father's voice, booming from the living room. "You're going." That was it. 2 words, and the matter was closed. There was no arguing with that tone. On the morning of the trip, Isiosa moved around the house like she was walking through thick mud. She packed her bags at a snail's pace, hoping to delay the inevitable. Her mother kept bustling around her, urging her to move faster, complaining that her father hated traveling late. None of S.A.'s siblings were coming. They all had their own in-laws and families to spend the holidays with. So once again, it was just her, her parents, and the long road ahead. She would never admit it out loud, but a part of her already missed both Tade and Emeka. They had both called her the night before, each one completely unaware of the other's existence in her life. Tade's voice was warm and concerned. "Please travel safely, okay? Don't forget to send me pictures when you get there." Emeka's tone was more playful, but just as affectionate. "Call me when you land for village. I go miss you small." She had giggled at both messages, her heart swelling with that familiar feeling of being important, of being chosen. But now, as she squeezed into the back seat of her father's car, surrounded by bags of rice, groundnut oil, and Christmas clothes, that feeling was replaced by a familiar irritation. The journey felt endless. The roads were dusty and bumpy, shaking the car relentlessly. There were countless police checkpoints where her father had to argue and bargain. The traffic in every small town they passed through was maddening. All the while, her mother sat in the front seat, praying loudly and fervently for journey mercies. Her father gripped the steering wheel, muttering complaints about the bad roads and reckless drivers. And Isiosa just stared at her phone, her thumb hovering over her screen, desperately waiting for the network bars to reappear so she could reply to her messages. The city, and the 2 lives she had built there, felt a million miles away. The village greeted her with a wall of noise. Children's shouts, aunties' tight hugs, uncles calling her big girl, and the loud chatter of neighbors gossiping. The family compound was already packed with relatives who had arrived before them. Everyone fussed over her. She was the last born, the city girl, the beautiful daughter of teacher Osifo. She managed a polite smile through it all, even when she really didn't feel like it. But the nights in the village were the absolute worst. The silence was deafening, the darkness was complete, broken only by the distant hum of a generator. It all just made her feel so incredibly lonely. She lay on a thin mattress, just staring at the ceiling as her parents slept peacefully in the next room. There was nothing to distract her here. No city lights painting the sky, no friends to call, no places to go. And worst of all, no Tade, no Emeka. Her mind couldn't escape them. It wandered to them constantly. She found herself scrolling through old chat messages, staring at their pictures saved on her phone. And sometimes, when the night breeze felt a little too cold, she'd hug her pillow tight and just wish she was back in the city, back in the life that was truly hers. By the fourth night, a deep restlessness had completely taken her over. She missed being touched, being held, being looked at with admiration. She missed the constant affection she was so used to getting in the city. She missed the attention from the two men who made her feel so alive. She tried to reason with herself, telling herself it wasn't her fault. She was just lonely. She was just bored. She'd be fine as soon as she got back home. But deep down, a craving was starting to grow, a feeling she couldn't possibly explain to anyone. She'd close her eyes and imagine returning to the city, seeing Tade first, feeling his strong arms wrap around her. She remembered the gentle way he smiled whenever he saw her. Then, her thoughts would drift to Emeka, the way he looked at her with such raw, untamed intensity. Those thoughts alone were enough to light a fire inside her. She'd press a pillow to her chest and whisper into the darkness, "Let this Christmas just end already." Every morning, she would wake up and cross another day off the small calendar she'd brought with her. Her mother noticed her growing impatience and just laughed. "Essay, your body is here, but your mind is already in Benin," she teased. Essay would just smile, trying her best to hide the real truth behind her restlessness. Her father would shake his head and say, "Young girls, always in a rush." Christmas Day was loud and festive, filled with mountains of jollof rice, the crackle of firecrackers, and long, drawn-out family prayers. But Essay was only half there. She went through the motions, but her heart wasn't in it. Her mind, her desires, they were all waiting for the trip back to the city. She knew exactly what she wanted to do the moment she got home, the moment the car parked, the moment she unpacked her bags. She already knew the first place she would go, the first person she would see, the first door she would knock on. And she knew, deep down, that it wouldn't stop with just one person. When the holiday finally ended and they started loading the car to head back home, Isiosa felt a powerful rush of excitement surge through her veins. The closer they got to the city, the faster her heart beat. Her parents just thought she was eager to get back to her normal life, her studies, her friends. But the truth was so much deeper than that. She was eager to return to the two different worlds she had been missing so badly. The two men she had left behind. The two men she truly believed she could manage. She had no idea that the decisions she was about to make, all within the first 24 hours of her return, would end up shaping her destiny in ways she could never, ever have predicted. The day they got back to Benin, the sky was unusually bright. Even the familiar city noise, the hum of traffic and people, sounded like a welcome home song just for her. As her father drove through the gates of their compound, a thrill ran through Isiosa's body. Finally, freedom again. Her parents moved slowly, unloading the luggage, greeting neighbors, complaining about the long and tiring trip. But Isiosa's mind was already miles away. She rushed straight to her room, dropped her bag on the floor, and immediately grabbed her phone. The network signal was back. Messages flooded in. The first one was from Tade. "Hope you're close to the city? I can't wait to see you." And then, one from Emeka. "Baby girl, you done lost don't forget me, Sha." A smile spread across her face. The kind of smile she had missed so much during her days in the village. She took a quick shower, applied some light makeup, and pulled on a fitted top and jeans. She walked out to the living room and told her mother, "Mummy, I'm going to see Ivy." Her mother, too tired from the trip to argue, just nodded. Within 30 minutes, she was standing at Tade's front door. He opened it with a wide, happy grin, pulling her into a warm hug before she could even say a word. "I missed you," he whispered into her hair. "I missed you too," she said back, and she meant it, but not completely. They spent hours just talking, laughing, catching up on everything they'd missed. Tade kept touching her face gently, as if he needed to make sure she was really there, in front of him. He had bought her food, snacks, and even had a small gift for her, a beautiful necklace he'd saved to surprise her with. She felt special. She felt safe. She felt wanted. Everything seemed perfect, except for that ache that was still lingering inside her. That hunger she had been carrying with her since Christmas. That craving the village silence could not satisfy. Even after they shared intimate moments, the feeling didn't go away. In fact, it only grew stronger. Tade was everything good and gentle and kind, but she still felt a familiar emptiness inside. A longing for something rougher, something wilder, something unpredictable. A longing that only one person could satisfy. Emeka. The need was a constant hum beneath her skin. As she lay beside Tade, his arm draped protectively over her, she should have felt content. And a part of her did. But another part, a louder, more insistent part, was already planning her next move. She checked the time on her phone. It was getting late, but not too late. She gently slipped out of Tade's embrace. I should get going, she said softly. My parents will be wondering where I am. He looked disappointed but understood. Okay, he said, kissing her forehead. Call me when you get home. Of course, she promised, a promise she had no intention of keeping right away. The moment she stepped out into the cool night air, she felt a fresh wave of energy. The guilt was there, a small whisper in the back of her mind, but the anticipation was louder. She didn't go home. Instead, she ordered a ride and typed in another address, Emika's address. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and excitement. This was reckless. This was risky. This was exactly what she wanted. When she got to Emika's place, she didn't even need to knock. He must have seen her ride pull up. The door swung open, and there he was, leaning against the frame with a lazy, knowing smirk on his face. He didn't say, I missed you. He didn't pull her into a gentle hug. He just looked her up and down, a fire in his eyes that mirrored the one she felt inside. I knew you'd come, he said, his voice a low rumble. He pulled her inside, his grip firm on her arm, and the world of Tade, of gentleness and safety, melted away instantly. With Emika, there was no talking, no catching up. There was just a raw, undeniable chemistry that consumed them both. It was chaotic, it was intense, and it was exactly the release she had been craving for weeks. He was the storm to Tade's calm, the chaos to his order. And in that moment, she believed she needed both. She finally stumbled home in the early hours of the morning, creeping into her room like a thief in the night. She felt drained, yet strangely energized. She had done it. She had successfully navigated both her worlds in a single night. As she lay in her own bed, the scent of Tade's cologne faintly on her clothes and the memory of Emika's touch still fresh on her skin, she felt a dangerous sense of power. She thought she was in control. She thought she could have it all. She had returned to the city and reclaimed her life, or so she believed. But what she had actually done was light a fuse that was now burning steadily, leading to an explosion she couldn't yet see, an explosion that would shatter all three of their lives. The game had just begun, and she was already in way over her head. The excuse. As evening approached, she stood up suddenly. I need to go, she said. Tade looked surprised. So quick? Stay a little longer now. I can't, she said, avoiding eye contact. I'm meeting an old friend, someone from my secondary school. She just returned to town. It was a lie, and she didn't even blink while saying it. Tade didn't suspect anything. He simply nodded. Okay, be safe. And please call me when you get home. I will, she replied smoothly. She stepped out of the house with her heart beating fast, not with guilt, but anticipation. Heading to Emika. The moment she left Tade's street, she hailed a bike and gave Emika's address. She didn't care that her hair was slightly messy or that her makeup had faded. She knew Emika wouldn't care. As the bike sped through the roads, she felt that rush again, the dangerous, addictive feeling only Emika gave her. When she reached his area, the dusty street, the loud music from a nearby kiosk, and the smell of frying akara felt strangely comforting. She knocked on his door once. Who be that? Emika's voice called from inside. It's me, she said softly. He opened the door with a half-smile that slowly turned into full excitement. Look who finally remembered me, he teased, pulling her inside. The reunion she had craved. Being with Emika felt like fire to her. Wild, unfiltered, intense, and she allowed the craving she had bottled up for weeks to pour out freely. Afterwards, she lay on his bed, breathless, her heart racing with a mixture of satisfaction and relief. This was what she had been missing, what she couldn't get from Tade, what overwhelmed her and made her forget everything else. Emika looked at her with a smile, brushing her arm lightly. You day enjoy me too much, he joked. She laughed, playfully hitting him on the shoulder. Before she left, she reached into her bag and handed him some money. For food, she said. Emika didn't pretend to reject it. He needed it, and she knew. He smiled and kissed her forehead. Thank you, my girl. No go forget me again, oh. I won't, she replied. But in her mind, she thought, I will never leave either of you. The witness. As she left Emika's house, walking down the narrow path, She didn't notice the man standing near a small shop. He had been buying cigarettes when he looked up and saw her. It was Kunnel, Tade's close friend. His eyes widened as he watched her walk away from Emika's building. He knew exactly where she was coming from, exactly what it meant. He pulled out his phone immediately. Tade needed to hear this. And in that moment, the peaceful balance Isiosa thought she could maintain began to shift. The secrets she managed so carefully were starting to leak into daylight, and her life was crossing into a dangerous territory she didn't yet see coming. A dangerous sight. Kunnel stood by the small kiosk, cigarette in hand, frozen in shock as he watched Isiosa walk out of Emika's compound. He knew that street. He knew the people who lived there. And he knew there was only one reason a young lady would be coming out of that particular building at that particular hour. His friend, Tade, was about to be heartbroken. He watched her disappear into the evening crowd before pulling out his phone. His hands shook, not because he was afraid of her, but because he dreaded the pain this truth would bring. He dialed Tade. "Tade, were you day?" Kunnel asked immediately. "Omo, I'm just at home, resting. I saw your missed call earlier. You day all right?" Kunnel hesitated. He looked at the direction she had gone, then took a deep breath. "Tade, I just see something." "See what?" Tade asked, still relaxed, unaware of the bomb about to drop. Kunnel exhaled slowly. "I just see SA now. She comment from one guy house for 3rd Junction side. That small pink building behind the mechanic shop." Silence. Long, stretching silence. Then Tade laughed weakly, almost nervously. "Kunnel, stop that thing. SA no fit day there." Kunnel's voice turned serious. "Tade, I know your girlfriend when I see her. Nah she. She wear blue top and black jeans. I even call her name small." She looked back. Tade's breath caught in his throat. "You're sure?" "I'm very sure, bro." Another long silence. Kunnel added, "I know no weddin' she day do for that guy place, but I know the man day that room oh. The place no be spot for casual visit. I day tell you as your guy." Tade's throat was suddenly dry. He whispered, "Thanks. I hear you." When he ended the call, he sat on the edge of his bed, shaking. His stomach twisted painfully. His mind raced in circles. But after a few minutes, he stood up and told himself, "No, she won't do that. SA can't do that to me." He shook his head violently, trying to banish the thought. People just want to spoil what we have. He convinced himself Kunnel was mistaken. He convinced himself he was overthinking. He convinced himself love was stronger than rumors. But a small crack had already formed in his trust. A crack that would only widen with time. Isiosa returns home. When Isiosa got home that night, she was glowing. Her steps were light, her face relaxed. Her mother looked at her and smiled. "Your friend must have really missed you. See how happy you are." SA forced herself not to flinch. "Yes, Ma." Inside her room, she collapsed on her bed, replaying the entire day in her head. The gentle comfort of Tade, the wild intensity of Emika. Her heart danced. Her body tingled. Her mind felt satisfied. She felt unstoppable. 2 men, 1 heart. 2 lives, 1 girl. Everything under control. Or so she believed. The warning. The next day, Tade called her. His voice was different. Not angry, not accusing, just strange. "SA, where were you yesterday evening?" he asked casually. Her heart skipped, but she recovered quickly. "With Ivy," she lied smoothly. "Didn't I tell you?" "Yes, you did." His quiet tone unnerved her for a second, but she brushed it off. "Why? Is everything okay?" "Yeah." Tade forced a smile through the phone. "Everything is fine." But it wasn't. In fact, that night, he prayed before sleeping, something he rarely did. Not because he was sure she was cheating, but because he didn't know what to believe anymore. Justifying herself. Meanwhile, Isiosa remained blissfully unaware of the crack forming in her relationship. She told herself she deserved love from both men because each one fulfilled different needs. "Tade is my future," she thought while applying lip gloss, admiring her reflection in the mirror. "But Emika is my happiness." She never considered loyalty. She never feared consequences. She never imagined a world where the truth came out. In her mind, she was skillful enough to balance everything. Life had not yet shown her that secrets are like smoke. You can hide the fire for a while, but the smoke always finds a way out. A brewing storm. In the days that followed, Kunnel observed her quietly. He didn't confront her. He wasn't foolish. Instead, he watched the pattern. Her sudden excuses. Her late responses. Her disappearing acts. Every sign pointed to trouble. And though Tade tried to ignore it, The seed of doubt had been planted in his heart. He loved her deeply. He trusted her blindly. And that made the wound even deeper. Isiosa continued living her double life, not knowing that one careless moment had already started the chain reaction that would destroy everything she believed she controlled. The storm was growing, quietly, patiently, inevitably, and soon it would break. The mist period. The first sign came quietly. One morning, as Isiosa stood in front of her mirror adjusting her hair, she felt a heaviness in her lower belly, dull, lingering, unfamiliar. At first, she ignored it. She assumed her monthly cycle was on the way. But 2 days passed, then 5, then 7. Still nothing. She tried to stay calm. After all, stress could delay things. Travel could delay things. Even weather could delay things. At least that was what she convinced herself. But deep down, a cold fear wrapped itself around her heart. Because she knew her cycle was never late. Not even by a day. Strange symptoms. Days turned into weeks. Her appetite changed. Her mornings came with nausea. Smells she once enjoyed suddenly irritated her. One afternoon, while her mother cooked stew in the kitchen, S.A. ran to the bathroom and vomited so violently her hands trembled. Her mother knocked on the door. "S.A., are you okay?" I'm fine," she lied, rinsing her mouth quickly. But she wasn't fine. Not at all. Her mind had begun doing dangerous calculations. Dates, times, memories. The days she had been with Tade. The same days she had been with Emeka. Her hands shook. Her breath shortened. No, 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 she whispered to herself. It can't be that. The test. 3 days later, she bought a pregnancy test kit from a small pharmacy far from home, somewhere no one knew her. She hid it inside her bag and hurried home, praying her mother wouldn't ask questions. That night, her parents went to evening fellowship, and S.A. finally found the chance to take the test. Her palms were sweating. Her legs felt weak. She locked herself in the bathroom, tore open the packet with trembling fingers, and followed the instructions. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 3. When she finally found the courage to look, her world shattered. 2 bold red lines. Positive. No, no, no. This can't be happening, she whispered, covering her mouth as tears filled her eyes. God, please not me. She sank to the floor, her back against the cold tiles. Her mind was blank, then racing, then blank again. 1,000 thoughts crashed into one another, none making sense. Pregnant, pregnant, pregnant. And worst of all, whose child? The fear inside. Her heart thumped loudly as she stumbled back to her bedroom. She locked the door and sat on her bed, shaking with panic. She replayed the last few months, her visits to Tade, her visits to Emeka. The timing overlapped. The dates matched both men. A cold wave washed over her. She wasn't only pregnant. She was pregnant in confusion. What would her parents say? What would her mother's church members say? What would Tade say? What would Emeka say? What would she do? She pressed her hands to her face, tears streaming uncontrollably. The choice. By the next morning, she had made up her mind. She would tell Tade. He was the stable one, the responsible one, the man who could take care of her, the man her parents would approve of, the man whose future was already built. She convinced herself it made sense. He will handle it, she whispered. He will support me. She didn't even consider telling Emeka. She knew he didn't have money. He barely survived on his own. What would he do with a baby? But choosing Tade didn't erase one thing. Her conscience. Every time she thought about Emeka, guilt stabbed her heart. Every time she remembered their moments together, shame washed over her. But she forced herself not to think too deeply. She had to protect her future. She had to survive this. She had to choose wisely. And Tade was the only choice. Breaking the news. When she visited him later that week, her heart pounded as she entered his house. He was happy to see her, smiling warmly, unaware of the storm she carried inside. "What happened?" he asked, noticing her shaky hands. "You look tense." She took a deep breath. "Tade, I'm pregnant." His expression froze, shock first, then joy warming his features. "Pregnant?" he whispered, stepping closer. "You're serious?" "Yes," she replied, her voice barely audible. He pulled her into a tight embrace, laughing softly into her hair. "S.A., you don't know how happy you've made me." She closed her eyes as guilt stabbed her heart again. He was happy. He trusted her. He believed completely. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know the doubts. He didn't know the danger behind her silence. The engagement. A week later, he proposed. On one knee. With a ring he had saved money for. With his heart open. And Isiosa said yes. Smiling. Pretending. Hiding a truth that could destroy him completely. The secret she chose to carry. From that day onward, she kept the secret to herself. She never told Emeka. She never told her parents. She never told anyone. But secrets don't disappear. They grow. They expand. They follow you everywhere. And Isiosa's secret was growing inside her, literally. Every kick, every swell, every sleepless night reminded her that consequences were coming, whether she was ready or not. A ring and a promise. The day Tate proposed was one Isiosa would never forget, not because it was the happiest day of her life, but because it was the heaviest. He took her to a quiet garden restaurant, a place decorated with soft lights and blooming flowers. She thought they were only going for dinner. She never imagined a ring was waiting in his pocket, wrapped in a small velvet box. She sat across from him, her heart pounding, not from excitement, but from guilt. She had been feeling more nauseous lately, and her clothes were starting to cling differently to her body. She could no longer hide the pregnancy for long. But Tate was oblivious. He spent the entire evening stealing glances at her, smiling like someone who had found his world in one person. When the food arrived, he barely touched his plate. His fingers kept tapping against the table nervously. She sensed something was coming, but didn't know what. Then he cleared his throat and stood up. Before she could ask what he was doing, he dropped to one knee. S.A. froze. Her breath caught in her chest. People around them paused, watching. Tate opened the small box and looked up at her with eyes full of sincerity and love she didn't deserve. Isiosa, he said, his voice steady but emotional. When you told me you were pregnant, I knew that God had blessed me. You've given me the greatest gift of my life. I want to build a future with you. I want to take care of you. I want to protect you and our child. Her eyes filled with tears, not from joy, from shame. He continued, I love you more than I can explain. So please, will you marry me? A hush fell across the restaurant. Everyone waited. Her heartbeat became a drum in her ears. She knew she was standing at a crossroads, between truth and survival, between honesty and comfort. But she remembered her earlier decision, the one she made the day she saw the two red lines. She chose security. She chose Tate. Yes, she whispered. Tate exhaled as if he had been holding his breath for hours. He slipped the ring onto her trembling finger and hugged her tightly as people clapped around them. But in the middle of that applause, Isiosa felt a deep coldness spreading inside her chest. She had said yes, but she was not free. She was trapped in the consequences of her own choices, planning the future. From that day onward, Tate became even more devoted. He started acting like a husband already, caring, attentive, protective. He bought baby items, tiny socks, soft blankets, feeding bottles. He downloaded pregnancy apps and excitedly shared weekly updates with her. See what it says here. By now the baby's heartbeat is strong. He started saving aggressively, talking about renting a bigger apartment, buying a car that would be better for carrying a child, and even setting up a small business for her after she delivered. He was dreaming for 2 and planning for 3. Meanwhile, S.A. saw her life shifting rapidly, faster than she could process. She should have been happy, but she wasn't, because every time she held the engagement ring, images of Emeka flashed in her mind. His small room, his rough laughter, his warm eyes, his tight hugs, his voice calling her my girl. She pushed those memories away. She told herself she had to stop thinking about him. She told herself the baby was probably Tate's anyway. He was the responsible one, the man who could give her child stability. But guilt is stubborn. It doesn't leave just because you're pretending. The secret visits. Even after the engagement, S.A. did something dangerous. She continued visiting Emeka. At first she told herself she was only going to say hello, just to check on him, just to maintain the connection she couldn't fully let go of. But feelings are not switches you can turn off. He didn't know she was engaged. He didn't know she was pregnant. He only knew she had traveled for Christmas and come back acting a little different. When she walked into his room after the engagement, Emeka's face brightened instantly. "Ah, my Madame Dawn show," he joked, pulling her into a hug. She hugged him back, her heart twisting painfully. They talked. They laughed. They spent time together. And though she tried to stop herself, the bond between them refused to break. She knew it was wrong. She knew she was playing with fire. She knew she was dragging him deeper into a story he didn't understand. Yet she stayed, silently breaking 2 hearts at once. The growing belly. As the weeks passed, Isa's belly slowly began to round out. She wore big shirts and loose dresses when visiting Emeka, pretending it was just fashion. But she knew time was running out. Soon, her body would betray her. Soon, she wouldn't be able to hide anything. Soon, the world she built on lies would collapse. She stopped visiting Emeka eventually, only because her belly grew too big to hide. He called her repeatedly, asking why she didn't come anymore. She lied again. I'm busy. I'm helping my mother with something. I'm tired. I'm not feeling fine. He sensed something was wrong, but he didn't know what. And she wasn't brave enough to tell him. Not yet. Blind love. Meanwhile, Tade worshipped her. He would show up at her house with fruits, vitamins, clothes, food, anything to make her comfortable. Her mother grew fond of him. Her father, though reserved, approved of him. Everyone believed she had found a good man. Only she knew the truth. Only she carried the fear. Only she woke up some nights shaking, wondering whose child was growing inside her. And only she knew. Her world was balancing on lies. And lies don't last forever. The truth was coming. Slowly. Inevitably. And when it arrived, it would break everything. The twins arrive. Isiosa's pregnancy had reached its final weeks, and the once subtle worry inside her had grown heavier with every passing day. Her body had changed, her movements were slower, and the weight of secrecy pressed against her chest like an unyielding stone. Yet, she continued smiling, pretending that everything was perfect. Tade was ecstatic. He fussed over her constantly, waking up before her to make breakfast, attending every checkup, and never letting her lift a finger. He imagined the baby's arrival as the pinnacle of their love story. He had already picked out names, decorated the nursery, and bought matching outfits, blissfully unaware that reality had already twisted itself into something he could never have anticipated. The labor begins. The labor started quietly one humid morning. Isiosa woke to a sharp, unfamiliar pain in her lower abdomen. At first, she tried to ignore it, telling herself it was just a normal cramp. But the contractions grew stronger, more relentless. Her mother, who had been sleeping nearby, rushed to her side, panic flashing across her eyes. "Essay, sit down. The hospital. We're going to the hospital now," she shouted, her voice shaking with urgency. Tade, who had been at work, received a call and arrived almost immediately, anxiety etched across his handsome face. Isiosa felt a flicker of guilt seeing his worried eyes, the way he held her hand like she was fragile glass. He didn't know the full story. He thought she was carrying only his child. A miracle and a shock. Hours passed, sweat and tears blending in the hospital room. Nurses and doctors moved swiftly, their calm voices directing the chaos. Isiosa clutched her mother's hand while Tade stood close, whispering encouraging words. And then, two cries pierced the air. Twins. Two beautiful baby boys. The room filled with the soft, rhythmic sound of life beginning. But something made Tade pause. Something small yet unmistakable. One baby was fair-skinned, almost resembling him. The other was dark-skinned, darker than both of them. A quiet tension filled the room, unnoticed by Isiosa, who was too exhausted and elated to pay attention. She reached for both babies, tears streaming down her face. "They're perfect," she whispered. Tade smiled faintly, but a seed of doubt took root in his heart, buried under relief and joy. For now, he dismissed it. Perhaps it was just a trick of genetics, he told himself. He hugged Isiosa and kissed her forehead, holding his children. The days after, the first week passed like a surreal dream. Nurses came and went, doctors checked vitals, and the hospital room became a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and exhaustion. Tade was a perfect father in public view, doting, proud, and present. He kept telling everyone, "They are mine. I will raise them with all my heart." But the doubt lingered like a shadow. He couldn't stop noticing the difference in skin tone, the faint resemblance of one of the twins to someone else he could not name. Isiosa, on the other hand, felt a mixture of relief and panic. She held both babies, whispering prayers that Tade would never discover the truth. She told herself she would figure it out, that she could manipulate reality enough to survive this delicate balance. But fate rarely gives you that luxury. A quiet suspicion. Tade's friends began to notice his distracted glances at the babies. Even his own father questioned quietly, "Son, are you sure both belong to you?" Tade laughed nervously, brushing it off. He couldn't let anyone think ill of Isiosa. She had given him joy, a child, and he was determined to believe in the miracle, even if his heart whispered otherwise. And yet, doubt gnawed at him. Each time he looked at the darker twin, he felt a strange pang, a suspicion that refused to leave, whispering that something in his carefully constructed world was off. Isiosa tried to avoid those glances. She smiled when he looked at the babies, and she cradled both as if to shield the truth from his eyes. But 1 week after birth, that fragile shield would break. Doubts and whispers. The house was quiet that evening, the soft hum of the fan mingling with the rhythmic breathing of the twins in their bassinets. Isiosa sat on the couch, carefully cradling both boys, smiling softly at Tade as he fussed over feeding bottles in the kitchen. Everything looked perfect. Everything appeared normal. But Tade's mind refused to be at ease. A seed of doubt. Ever since the twins' birth, Tade couldn't stop noticing differences. He'd been a doting father from day one, yet a small, nagging voice inside him whispered relentlessly. The fair-skinned twin, he was unmistakably his. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same soft nose, the same tiny hands. But the darker one, he didn't share any resemblance. His skin was darker, his features subtly different. He looked like someone else entirely, and that realization haunted Tade. He tried to push it aside, telling himself, "It's nothing. Genetics can be strange. Twins are unpredictable." Yet, the more he looked at the darker twin, the more the doubt grew. And the more Isiosa smiled while cradling him, the more his heart ached with suspicion. Whispers of concern. Cunnel, his close friend, had been observing Isiosa from the sidelines long before the twins arrived. He remembered the day he saw her leaving Emika's house, and that memory resurfaced as he visited Tade. "You sure everything's all right with the twins?" Cunnel asked casually one afternoon, sipping his drink. Tade frowned. "Why would it not be?" Cunnel shrugged, trying not to alarm him. "Just, differences. Sometimes babies don't always look alike. I just thought I'd ask." Tade forced a laugh, but inside, a cold knot tightened in his stomach. Cunnel's words, though innocent, had planted another tiny seed of suspicion, unease in the heart. That night, Tade stayed awake long after Isiosa had gone to bed. He watched the twins sleep, his hands gripping the edge of the crib as if holding on to sanity itself. He whispered to himself, "One day I'll know. I just need to be sure." He loved Isiosa fiercely. He had been dreaming of this family for months, planning for it, imagining it. But the doubt had begun to grow like a dark vine, creeping into every thought, every glance, every moment he shared with her. And even though he wanted to trust her, even though he believed in her, that small seed of doubt refused to die. The first sign of conflict. Isiosa noticed the change too. She saw the way Tade stared at the darker twin for long moments. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his smile didn't reach his eyes. Each glance made her heart skip a beat. She knew the day he questioned her was coming. She tried to prepare herself mentally, rehearsing apologies she wasn't yet ready to say, trying to stay calm while the storm brewed silently. Her secret, carried silently for months, now weighed heavier than ever. She had thought she could manage it all. 2 men, 2 lives, 1 heart. She had believed she could control the narrative. But Tade's love, his devotion, his suspicion, it was beginning to push her to the edge. And she knew, deep down, that sooner or later, the truth would demand to be revealed. The calm before the storm. For now, the house remained quiet. The twins slept. Tade tucked them in meticulously, humming soft lullabies. Isiosa forced herself to smile, trying to match his calm demeanor. But both of them were walking on a fragile line. One wrong word, one slip of emotion, and the delicate balance she had maintained would shatter. The whispers of doubt were growing louder in Tade's heart. The shadow of truth was inching closer. And no matter how carefully she tiptoed, Isiosa knew it was only a matter of time before the world she had built on lies would come crashing down around her. The DNA test. The house felt unusually silent that morning. Isiosa sat on the couch, rocking the fair-skinned twin in her arms while the darker one slept in the crib beside her. She could sense the storm brewing. Tade had been distant for the past few days, his eyes avoiding hers, his hands fidgeting in ways that screamed unspoken thoughts. Isiosa's heart thumped violently in her chest. She had always known this day would come, the day when her carefully maintained secret might unravel. But she never imagined it would happen so soon. Tade's decision. Tade had spent the night tossing and turning. The doubts that had quietly gnawed at him since the twins' birth had grown into an obsession. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly, and the gentle love he felt for Isiosa was now tangled with fear and suspicion. After hours of silent anguish, he made a decision. One he dreaded but felt he had no choice but to take. He would confirm his doubts scientifically. He called the clinic he had researched quietly the day before and booked a private appointment for a DNA test for the twins. He didn't tell Isiosa. He wanted to be absolutely certain before confronting her. The test would reveal everything. And in that moment, Isiosa's heart knew the reckoning was near. The test. The following morning, Tade gently took the twins into the clinic, holding each one tenderly while nurses took the necessary samples. Isiosa had stayed home, pretending to rest, unaware that the final confirmation of her secret was already in motion. Hours later, Tade returned with the results in his hand. He sat silently on the edge of the couch, the paper trembling slightly in his grasp. Isiosa, sensing his unusual demeanor, looked at him anxiously. "What's wrong?" she asked softly, trying to mask the panic creeping into her chest. Tade's face was pale. His voice was low, almost shaking. "Essay. I have the results." Her stomach dropped. She tried to stay composed. He handed her the envelope, but before she could even touch it, he said, "One of them is mine. The other is not." Time seemed to stop. The revelation. Isiosa's mind went blank. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. She had anticipated anger, perhaps disappointment, but the sheer finality of Tade's words struck her like a thunderbolt. "No, no, that can't be," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Essay," Tade said, his voice breaking slightly. "I wanted to trust you. I wanted to believe everything would be fine. But now, the truth is here. I can't ignore it." She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "It's not true. I didn't." Tade cut her off, his tone now firm, resolute. "The test doesn't lie. One of our children is not mine. I can't live in a house built on lies. You need to leave. I will take care of my child. But you need to go." Isiosa's plea. Her knees buckled. She fell to the floor, grabbing his hand desperately. "Tade, please. I can explain. I didn't mean for this to happen. I love you. I love you both. I didn't know how to tell you." But Tade's face was unmoving. He looked at her with a mixture of sorrow and resolve that crushed her from within. "I gave you my heart," he said softly, almost breaking, "and you betrayed it. I will love my child. I will provide for both of them if I have to. But you go. Go and tell the other man." The aftermath. Isiosa left the house that day, her heart shattered, the twins' cries echoing in her mind. She rented a small apartment with the child support Tade would provide. Alone, she held both children close, realizing for the first time the full weight of her actions. She had wanted love. She had wanted passion. She had wanted security. And now, she had nothing but the bitter taste of regret. As she rocked the twins to sleep, she whispered to herself, "Cheating doesn't pay, it never pays." She knew the path ahead would be difficult. She would raise the twins on her own, hiding from the consequences of her choices. But deep down, she understood the truth she had ignored for too long. Every action has a cost. Every secret has a price. And some lies, no matter how carefully kept, will always come to light. Rebuilding and reality. The first few weeks in her small apartment were the hardest Isiosa had ever faced. The walls were bare, the rooms tiny, and the hum of the city outside reminded her that life had moved on while she had been caught in her own web of choices. Yet, she had the twins, one fair-skinned, one dark-skinned, both completely dependent on her. Holding them, she felt a surge of both love and fear. Love, because they were her children. Fear, because they were reminders of every mistake she had made. A new routine. Each day followed a relentless routine. Feeding, changing diapers, bathing, rocking to sleep, and doing it all again. She cooked simple meals, sometimes skipping her own food to ensure the twins were fed. She used the child support money from Tade to pay rent, buy essentials, and occasionally treat herself. But she could feel how limited her world had become. Gone were the glamorous outings, the thrills of seeing Emeka or Tade, the sense of freedom she had once cherished. Her life had shrunk to the small apartment and two tiny lives she now had to protect at all costs. Yet, even in exhaustion, a strange clarity settled over her. She realized that her actions had consequences she could no longer escape. The thrill of deception was gone, replaced by responsibility, worry, and constant vigilance. Facing the truth, she looked at the twins one evening, both asleep in their little cribs. One stirred, the darker one reaching out a tiny hand toward her. Isiosa knelt beside him, her heart heavy. "You're mine," she whispered softly. "All of you. Even if I made mistakes, even if I hurt the people I loved, I promise I will take care of you." She felt tears streak down her cheeks. It was a sobering realization. The choices she had made for love, pleasure, and security had led to this moment. And now, there was no one to share the burden but her. No Tate, no Emeka, just her, and the two tiny lives that depended on her. Learning to be strong. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, Isiosa adapted. She learned to manage her time, to organize her small apartment efficiently, and to care for both children without losing herself. She discovered an inner strength she hadn't known existed, a resilience born from necessity. She also realized she had to be careful. She couldn't risk anyone discovering the full truth. Tade continued to support his child, sending money regularly, but she kept him at a careful distance. Emeka, too, faded into the background, though the memories of him haunted her sometimes, reminding her of the choices she had made. The price of choices. As she watched the twins play together, laughing in their small, chubby way, Isiosa whispered to herself, "This is what I get for trying to have it all, for trying to love without limits. Cheating doesn't pay. And yet, life goes on, even when you make mistakes." She realized that raising the twins alone was not just about survival. It was about redemption. She could not undo the past, but she could shape their future. She could give them love, stability, and care, even if it came at the cost of her own comfort. And in that small apartment, filled with soft cries, gentle laughter, and tiny hands gripping hers, Isiosa finally understood what responsibility meant. She had played with fire, and she had burned. But now, she was learning to rise from the ashes. Her life would never be the same. Her choices had consequences. But she also understood that even in the aftermath of mistakes, there could still be hope, still be love, still be a chance to do better. For the first time in months, Isiosa allowed herself to breathe fully. The road ahead would be hard, but she was determined to walk it, step by step, with the two little lives that depended on her. The past catches up. Months had passed since Isiosa moved into her small apartment with the twins. Life had settled into a difficult, exhausting rhythm, but she had adapted. She fed them, bathed them, and watched them grow. Each day brought new challenges, but also a quiet sense of accomplishment. Yet, the past never stays buried. An unexpected knock. It was a humid afternoon when she heard a knock at her door. She was in the kitchen, stirring a small pot of stew, when the sound echoed through the tiny apartment. Who could that be? She muttered to herself, wiping her hands nervously. When she opened the door, she froze. There stood Emeka. His eyes widened slightly as he took in the scene. The two babies, the modest apartment, the exhausted but determined expression on her face. He began, his voice faltering. She stepped back, closing the door slightly. What are you doing here?" I heard," he stammered. "I heard some things. About the babies." Her heart raced. She had done everything to keep this part of her life hidden from him. Yet now, here he was, seeing the evidence, the tangible proof of her secrets. Confrontation. Emeka stepped closer, his hands slightly raised in a gesture of peace. "I didn't mean to come like this," he said softly. "But I need to know the truth." Isiosa's mind raced. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was here, she found herself paralyzed. "Emeka, it's complicated," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Complicated?" he repeated, pain flashing in his eyes. I thought what we had meant something." She swallowed hard, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "It did. It does. But Tade, he's the one who can provide for them. I couldn't." "You couldn't what?" he asked sharply. "Couldn't tell me? Couldn't trust me?" She faltered. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I thought I was doing the right thing." Emeka's expression darkened. His voice grew quiet but intense. "You were doing the right thing for who? Yourself?" A harsh reality. Isiosa lowered her gaze, unable to meet his eyes. She felt cornered, exposed, and utterly guilty. "Yes," she admitted softly. I was thinking about survival, about the babies. I didn't want them to go without. I, I made mistakes, Emeka. I know that. I can't take them back. Emeka stood in silence, anger and disappointment warring with lingering affection. He looked at the twins, who were now gurgling and reaching for her, and his heart ached. You had a choice, he said finally, his voice heavy. And you chose this. And I'm not the one raising them. You didn't trust me. You didn't even tell me. Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. I didn't know how. I thought. I thought it would be easier if I handled it myself. I didn't want to ruin everything. The fallout. For a moment, the room was silent except for the soft coos of the twins. Then, slowly, Emeka shook his head. I can't be part of this, he said finally, his voice breaking. I can't be part of a life built on lies. But I still care about you. I still care about them. Isiosa's chest tightened. She knew he was speaking the truth. He was devastated, just as Tade had been, but he still loved the children in some way. She nodded slowly, unable to speak. I'll take responsibility for my part, she whispered. I'll raise them. I'll make sure they're cared for. But I can't ask for your forgiveness. Not now. Not ever. Emeka sighed, backing away slightly. I hope you find a way to live with yourself, essay. But you have to know, the past doesn't stay quiet forever. It will always find you. A heavy silence. He left without another word, leaving her standing in the doorway, the soft cries of the twins filling the empty apartment. Isiosa sank to the floor, holding both babies close. She realized that no matter how carefully she had tried to hide the truth, no one's secrets could remain buried forever. She had survived, yes. She had adapted. But the consequences of her choices had a way of catching up, whether she was ready or not. And for the first time in months, she truly understood that life would not allow her to forget. Hard lessons. The apartment was quieter than usual. The twins slept peacefully, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Isiosa sat in the worn armchair, cradling a bottle of milk and staring at the wall, lost in thought. The past months had been the hardest of her life. She had survived the chaos of her choices, endured the heartbreak of Tade's rejection, and faced the disappointment of Emeka. Every day was a struggle, every decision weighed heavily. And yet, she was still here, still holding the two lives that depended entirely on her. Confronting reality. Isiosa had once believed that she could have it all: love, excitement, security, and freedom. She had chased after pleasure without thinking of the consequences, believing herself clever enough to manage two worlds. Now, reality had forced her to face the truth. There was no easy escape, no shortcuts. Every lie had a cost, and hers had been high. The love and trust of two men, her parents' potential disappointment, and the burden of raising two children alone. She whispered softly to herself. I thought I could play with fire and not get burned. I was wrong. So wrong. Learning responsibility. Over the following weeks, Isiosa began to establish a more stable life. She learned to budget the child support money from Tade, carefully dividing it to cover rent, food, clothing, and baby supplies. She discovered the immense challenges of motherhood: sleepless nights, endless feedings, and the constant worry of whether she was doing enough. Yet, amid the exhaustion, she began to find strength she never knew she had. She became resourceful, patient, and resilient. Every decision she made, every sacrifice she endured, was for the twins. You are my responsibility now, she whispered to them one night, holding them close. And I will not fail you. Not like I failed before. A bitter understanding. She also began to understand the deeper lessons of her choices. Love, she realized, could not be divided and kept hidden. Trust, once broken, could never be fully restored. And pleasure, however enticing, was always fleeting. Each day brought a new reminder of the consequences she had ignored. Tade's absence, Emeka's anger, the whispers of the past she could no longer control. But she also saw the small victories, tiny smiles from her babies, the warmth of holding them safely, the quiet pride in knowing that despite everything, she could care for them. Facing herself. One evening, after putting the twins to sleep, Isiosa looked into a cracked mirror. She didn't see the carefree, reckless girl she had once been. She saw a woman changed by experience, forced to confront the consequences of her own actions. I have to do better, she whispered, tracing the lines of her tired face. For them. For myself. I can't change the past, but I can shape what comes next. It was a bitter lesson, learned through tears, heartbreak, and sleepless nights. But it was a lesson she would carry forever. The path forward. Isiosa began making plans for the future. She enrolled in a part-time course to improve her skills, hoping to one day provide more for the twins. She looked for stable work that would allow her to care for them while earning a living. She built routines, schedules, and a semblance of order in a life that had once been chaotic. It was hard. It was exhausting. It was lonely. But it was honest. And for the first time in a long while, Isiosa felt a quiet sense of purpose. She had made mistakes, grave mistakes, but she was learning that life, no matter how cruel, demanded growth. And she was determined to rise from the wreckage of her choices, even if it meant walking the hard road alone. She whispered softly to herself again, this time with a hint of resolve. Cheating doesn't pay, but hard work, responsibility, and love, they might just save you. Acceptance and hope. The small apartment was quiet once again, but this time, it felt different. Not tense, not heavy, but alive in its own steady rhythm. Isiosa sat on the floor, cross-legged, with the twins playing beside her. One rolled over giggling, and the other reached for her hand, their tiny fingers curling around hers instinctively. Isiosa smiled, a slow, genuine smile that carried both relief and sorrow. She had come a long way, embracing responsibility. She had learned that life offered no shortcuts. Every choice carried a weight, and hers had nearly broken her. But she had survived. She had built a life from the fragments of her mistakes. She watched the twins laughing together, and a wave of pride washed over her. They were innocent, unaware of the chaos that had brought them into the world. They were hers to love, to protect, and to guide. Her heart whispered softly, I may have stumbled, I may have lied, but I will not fail them. I will do better. I must do better. Letting go of the past. The memories of Tade and Emika still lingered like shadows. She remembered the love, the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the DNA test that had shattered everything. She thought of Tade's eyes, full of hurt but resolute, and of Emika, whose disappointment had cut deep. She allowed herself to feel the weight of it, but she also let it go. She could not change the past. She could not undo the consequences of her actions. All she could do was move forward, one day at a time, with honesty and integrity as her guide. A fragile piece. Isiosa had found a rhythm in her life. She balanced work, classes, and caring for the twins. She had discovered strength in herself that she hadn't known existed, a resilience born of necessity, of love, and of survival. And in this new life, she felt a fragile peace. Not perfect, not without regret, but real. She whispered to herself as she tucked the twins into bed one night. You are my world now. Your smiles, your laughter, your little hands, this is what matters. I will not let the mistakes of my past define our future. Hope for the future. Isiosa looked out the small window of her apartment. The city stretched beyond, alive and relentless, much like her own life had been. But now, she faced it with a clearer mind and a stronger heart. She would continue to work, to learn, to grow. She would raise her children with love, teaching them honesty, compassion, and responsibility, the very lessons she had learned the hard way. And perhaps one day, she could forgive herself fully. For now, she whispered softly into the night. I have lost much, but I have gained more. I have my children, and I have the chance to build a life worthy of them. The past may haunt me, but the future is ours to shape, and I will not waste it. As she closed the window and turned off the light, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. She was no longer the reckless girl who sought love in two hearts. She was a mother, a protector, a survivor. And in that moment, Isiosa finally understood. Life's hardest lessons often lead to the strongest growth. She had fallen. She had burned. But now she was rising. Thanks for watching. Kindly like, share with friends, and subscribe for more amazing stories.